Hey guys, and welcome to the first interview I have ever filmed. In this one, I'm joined by Laurie Stach, the CEO of LaunchX, a global company that's really focused on helping high school students learn about entrepreneurship, which is a topic very close to my heart. She's also an alumni of both MIT Engineering and Harvard Business School. We are talking about the highs and lows of starting and running a company, where education is right now as a space, where it's headed, especially in terms of entrepreneurship, and finally, there's loads of practical tips if you're a student, teacher, or just want to start your own thing at the very end. It is my first interview, so I do get a bit nervous, especially in the beginning, but it gets better throughout the interview, I promise. So the first time we met with Laurie was at the European finals of the LaunchX competition, held in Brussels, Belgium. Laurie had a really motivating speech at the opening event. After that, we had a chat and decided to film an interview the next day at International School of Brussels. Thanks for hosting us, and talk about all of this. How our entrepreneurial attempt went, a video coming later, but right now it's about you and learning from Laurie. So the timestamps of the specific themes are below, since the interview is pretty long, and there's a lot of value coming your way. So lie back, enjoy, and let's roll the intro. Hey guys, I'm Max.
The same location, and get processes versus what they want, and eventually you win. Yeah!
Today, I'm here with the wonderful Laurie Stach, who is mainly the founder of the amazing company LaunchX and the CEO, right?
Yes.
And also a graduate from both MIT and Harvard, which is quite an ordinary. So, is there anything else you would like to tell about yourself to sum up the picture?
I think those are probably the highlights of it. LaunchX is mostly my life, so.
So, your main project, LaunchX, how did it come to life?
So LaunchX started about 6 years ago with over a discussion at brunch with a friend, not intending on starting a company in any way, just talking about some of the frustrations that we had with the education system.
Yeah.
One of them being that I know when I was in high school, I had so much creativity, ambition, passion, wanted to take on the world, and adults would always say, oh, you'll do great things someday when you have a degree and some experience. Meanwhile, and this friend that I was chatting with over brunch has actually kind of a similar path. She did Georgia Tech engineering and then Harvard Business School with me. Cool. And had the similar frustrations of the difficulty of starting new jobs and feeling like education didn't prepare us. So in those jobs, being asked to take initiative and creatively problem solve and try to make decisions without the perfect information that you get in homework was a little bit difficult. So what I love about entrepreneurship education, which LaunchX is based in, is how much it empowers high school students to start doing real things now, but then also builds the right skills and mindset for the future. So it builds that sense of initiative and problem solving and decision making in the absence of perfect information, because that's the way the real world is. And entrepreneurship education exposes you to the real world earlier.
yeah, definitely agree. So right now LaunchX is functioning for almost 6 years, if that's correct. And you've probably been through many rough times, right? So from the very beginning you launched the LaunchX, and till now, what were the hardest parts of starting a business that is focused on the education of high school students?
I'd say the hardest challenges were almost all in the first year, as well as some that were a little bit more recent. So probably the biggest challenges in that first year were really just developing some of the initial partnerships, counteracting some of the negativity that some people would have when we would pitch to them, and being able to just have enough confidence in myself to be able to pull things off. So started this as a separate entity from its own entire entity, and then went in-house of MIT for a few years, and then spun it back out. And so in that first year, developing the partnership and relationship with MIT was probably one of the most challenging parts, because I had my heart set on it as an alum of there, and got no tons of times before finally finding the right people to talk to, the right relationships, the people that really aligned with our values. And to a lot of people that know and understand what we do at LaunchX now, they might be surprised to hear that in the first year, as I would talk to different parents, students, and then especially potential speakers and educators at the more like collegiate level, I had a number of people who didn't really believe in the vision or mission and didn't understand it. So they would respond with very skeptical and almost insulting things about the potential of high school students and the potential of high school entrepreneurs in particular to do real things. And I think that's something that in a lot of ways has fueled me to prove that high school students are capable of amazing things now, and to really have so many students come together and unite and not just help LaunchX, but help themselves be able to prove what they're capable of.
Amazing. So as a high school student, I thank you. And so at this point, what do you think are the strongest points of the LaunchX?
The strongest points. I think the strongest thing about LaunchX is that we are very mission and vision driven. So we believe in empowering students and giving students these real world skills and mindset that prepare you for your futures. And entrepreneurship is just the avenue to be able to do that. And what I love about that as a mission is there were a million routes we could have taken in those first few years from expanding from that one summer program. In fact, a lot of people were surprised that we didn't immediately start going to other locations and expanding the summer program portion. But to me, and the impact that I wanted to make with students meant that we had to go further. We had to develop the clubs program, develop this means of scaling and reaching more people, even though it's not a profitable part, right? It's a part, in fact, that we invest in. And I think that's what's made LaunchX successful, is that we keep sight of that mission and vision and invest where we need to, even when it doesn't make business or financial sense, but it makes sense for our vision and mission. And I think that's the key differentiator of a lot of successful companies, is keeping sight on the big impact that they want to make and being willing to flex and figure out how the rest of it comes together.
So, what is important in a business is not focusing just on making money, right? It's about solving the problem and going for the goal, right? Yeah,
sometimes I like to... Gosh, I wish I would remember who I was quoting right now. But there's a quote that is, "Profit is the air you breathe." You don't wake up every day and say, "I'm going to breathe air today." You have something else that you're trying to accomplish, and then the other piece just comes. And it's similar for a business. If you're really helping people, if you really have a good vision and mission of what you want to accomplish, the money comes.
Great. And since we've talked about the strong sides, do you still see any weak points in the LaunchX?
Always.
That's good.
That's maybe too honest. No, there's always room for improvement. We're always testing new things each year, whether that be in the summer program, clubs, etc. One of the most difficult parts of starting a company, and actually the thing that causes most startups to fail, is team dynamics. And you can imagine how if that's so challenging for adults, then especially high school students who maybe haven't had as many opportunities to work in teams, it can be challenging. So we've been working on how to be able to better guide people in teams, as well as guide people in the early stages of that first year. The first year is the hardest part, and that's really what Launch is focused on, is that first bit of time. So there's a lot more ways that I think we could be supporting, but that's a good thing. I want there to always be new things that we can be doing, otherwise it gets boring.
Very interesting. I'll have to think about that later, but what you're doing is amazing, and to talk a bit more about LaunchX, what it is right now it's a summer program and a school year program, right? That begins during the first semester, and ends after, in the spring, usually right now, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just really great opportunity for the students, for the high school students to find a place or a space that provides them with the information and with the potential to try things out, right? Because it's not just about the learning and education part of things, but also about the execution. And so many people think, as do I, that that is a problematic thing in today's education, right? In many countries. Like that, not just high school, but if you're talking about high school, that it does not provide enough skills and knowledge for the real life out there, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about this?
Oh, I absolutely agree, and apologize to any high school educators who might watch this. But I think most of them would actually agree too. So, I mean, I think a couple of pieces to that. First of all, I mean, our longer term plan within LaunchX that we're starting to do some implementation of now is developing out teacher training programs to be able to implement it within the schools. And I see the clubs program as a means of proving the demand at the student level that then puts pressure on the high schools themselves to implement this more real world learning. So we started developing that teacher training program and started piloting and testing it some, and look forward to really trying to get entrepreneurship education mandated in high schools. That's part of the plan.
That's great.
And that teacher training program versus it just focusing on the materials itself, it is so much more about how an educator can become a facilitator of a classroom versus a lecturer, and how they can build that entrepreneurial ecosystem and culture that allows people to be more collaborative versus competitive. And I think a lot of the rest of school can teach us that it's kind of a winner take all, that there's a bell curve of grades or things like that. And I think the power of entrepreneurship is that it teaches that there's not just one right answer. There's a lot of approaches, and it also teaches you to figure out what you want to do with your life. I occasionally call it prototyping your career, because you can trial within a startup several different functions, different industries, etc. And I mean, you're familiar with that. We talk about the 3 different entrepreneurial types: the builder, the brander, and the business developer. And things like that are why I love entrepreneurship versus some of the other, I guess, modern educational tools like coding or this one specific mindset within STEM. Because not every student is going to be that builder type. Not everybody should or needs to learn to code. There also needs to be recognition of these other types and how to be able to work with them and appreciate both your own specific unique quirks and skills, but then also other people's and how those come together. Yeah,
like having a great team that combines well together, that it's not like just centric in one way, is very important. I actually talked a little bit more about that in my startup weekend video. Check it out. It's great that you're trying to incorporate these things into schools, because that's really, I believe, the way we need to go. And do you have any advice for either the students or the teachers that are in schools right now, and how they could at least do some little things that would guide them into the entrepreneurial thinking mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main value of doing something like entrepreneurship education is just learning to overcome those initial barriers of confidence and vulnerability that you need to have with going out and talking to people. So whether that be from interviewing early on, or pitching your idea, or user testing it, there's this part of us that I think we learn in school, that we want to have something perfect before we go share it, even with a mentor, but especially with the public. And so I think that's a mental barrier to try to overcome as early as possible, whether that be with students or educators. And that can be done with, some of the things that I think we've done this weekend, the little mini design challenge or one-day inventathon. Just finding a way through even just a little mini workshop to force people outside of their comfort zone. Because once you're outside of it once, it becomes way easier to do it more.
That's true. So, now you've created this society or this community of high school students that try to help each other out, right, and do these great entrepreneurial things. What's next?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I think the community is extremely powerful. Like I said, I think the next piece specifically of LaunchX is building out this teacher training program. Yes. And then through building that out, proving enough the value of entrepreneurship education to get it mandated in every high school in the world. So that's the, I guess, that's the small goal next step of launch. Plus then we're looking at being able to do, right now we're doing it just for high school students, and I think that there is an even more opportunity as we look at the full K-12. So from 5 years old all the way up to 18 years old. Wow. And what that continuum looks like, because as you might have seen in high school, there's already some things that we're having to kind of teach out of students that they've learned from the education system. Yes. So if we can start something like this even earlier on, that keeps that spirit of creativity and problem solving alive that kids have from a young age. It's built into us from a young age to explore and have this bit of curiosity about discovering the world. And if we can teach people from a young age that curiosity is awesome and not scary, and a means of being able to see the world for the opportunities it presents versus the challenges, then I think that'll just be an amazing fundamental shift in the way the world works, and the ability for people to be happy and find meaning in the work that they do going forward.
Great answer.
Thank you.
I mean, the ultimate goal would be to change the education, right? The whole thing, or the whole process of studying just to get grades, basically, and etc. Yeah. It's an important topic, to say the least. Yeah.
And I think the more that we develop this education at these younger ages, the more essentially pressure it puts on universities to improve the caliber of their education for students. And I know part of the reason that I started this is that it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I've changed, I did engineering in business school. I always knew that I wanted to do business school, but I changed jobs so many times because I was still searching for something that could keep me engaged and inspired. And I didn't really understand entrepreneurship very much until starting a company. And before that had changed things so much, because there were parts I loved of the work and there were parts that I didn't. And I never knew how to bring that together. And I think right now people are taught, if you like math and science, become an engineer. Or if you like rocks, be a geologist, or whatever kind of simplistic version of things. But it's way more complicated than that in terms of figuring out what you want to do with your career. And there's nuances of the size and type of company, of not just the role you have, but the industry. There's so many nuances to being able to be happy and find meaning in your work. And that's ultimately the goal that I have, is for people to be able to find that meaning to their work earlier in life. And so if you start along this entrepreneurial path and start getting a sense of what things feel like in the real world, you can find that meaning earlier. And gosh, what better impact could we have on the world than to be able to have everyone enjoy their jobs more? Every company would be more productive.
100%.
And every person would be happier. So that's what we want to do at LaunchX.
Sounds really great.
Thanks.
And so, after all of this, right now, yourself in this position, how does it feel to changing the world piece by piece, right?
Gosh, I don't think 16 or 18-year-old Laurie could have ever dreamed of having this awesome of a life. I love what I do, and I definitely, had to build my own job and my own company to be able to find this.
Yeah.
And every few years I set bigger goals, and we've managed to achieve all of them. I feel like a lot of people that are, similarly ambitious, like a lot of the LaunchX students, have these big lofty goals. And then as I've talked to a number of my friends who are also the MIT, Harvard, etc. crowd, everyone reaches this point where they achieve more than they ever thought possible. And then once you reach that point of achieving more than you ever thought possible, then you kind of sit back and say, well, what connects it all together? What's the bigger meaning behind all of it? And I think that's how our vision comes into place with LaunchX is, it's LaunchX's vision, but it's also Laurie Stach's mission. Like that's the impact I want to have on the world. That's the legacy that I want to have, is being able to improve education and help people find what they want to do with their lives earlier. And I think that's a transition that a lot of really successful people go through, is that like, oh my gosh, I've achieved more than I thought was possible. If I would tell my 16-year-old self this, they would be baffled. So what next? And that's exactly where we are with LaunchX and myself.
This is just incredible.
It's been a fun journey. I sometimes when I think about the kinds of cool things I've gotten to do, I have packed many lives within my life. Examples? Oh gosh. So when LaunchX went within MIT for a few years, I got to build a new makerspace at MIT and run that. And I got the opportunity to create a new class at MIT and teach it. And so as someone that doesn't have a PhD or anything, because most of the professors there have PhDs, but I got to build and teach a new class without having that level. And so, I wasn't a full professor, right? I was just an instructor there, but that's still just an honor that, gosh, I know most people would kill for. And I felt a little bit crazy then turning down continuing to do that, to spin LaunchX out and grow it. That was a difficult decision. And I think that I left that part out earlier when you said would have been the challenging times. Just over a year ago, I had to make that decision of, do I keep LaunchX limited to just running at MIT and just a select, small size of the club, and stay at MIT and continue with these amazing opportunities that they had given me personally, or do I spin it out and grow it and give up being an instructor at MIT? And I had to decide the latter. I had to, as I thought about each option and kind of lived the truth of what each of those would be for a couple of days, just thinking through it, realized that there were lots of people who could do what I did at MIT.
Yes.
There's only one Laurie Stach that can grow LaunchX.
Great point. And so to close it all up, to all the next Laurie Stachs that are now 16 and 18 years old, what would be probably the main advice to go on and to enter the entrepreneurship world if they still haven't yet gotten the chance to do so? What's the best thing?
I'll start with a little bit more general advice and then bring it down to entrepreneurship specifically. So the general advice that I would give to high school students is to embrace the things that you actually enjoy. And I'm specifically avoiding the word pursuing your passions right now, because I feel like that's advice a lot of people give that just puts too much pressure on yourself to figure out what this mystical passion thing that you have in your life is. Cool statistic, because you've heard me, I love data. Only 20% of people know their passion. And that's even of adults. Only 20% of people actually know their passion. And usually it's people who are in the more artistic, creative field. So I mean, a passion, it can be defined in so many ways. Like, I think I mentioned, I really like math and data and statistics, but that doesn't mean that I should have gotten a math degree and been an accountant or been a statistician. I would have been so bored with that. So I'd say try not to limit yourself by this very narrow idea of trying to figure out what your passion is and just pursue that. Remain a little bit flexible, but then just do things that you enjoy for the most part. Like follow those areas that excite you. And I'd say I also want to encourage people to figure out what they want to be awesome at. I think a lot of education teaches students to be well-rounded, which is just silly, right? I mean,
It is.
Sure, make sure that your, areas for development, weaknesses aren't going to ever be anything that clearly holds you back. But you don't need to be above average in everything. And in fact, if you're above average in everything, that means you're not freaking awesome in something. Yeah. You're not going to get hired for being above average in an area. You're going to get hired or start something based on being awesome at something. So figure out what you want to be awesome at. And I think that applies also then to a little bit, I said I was going to narrow it towards starting a company. So that was the more general stuff. Yeah. Figure out what you want to be awesome at.
Very important.
And then specifically to entrepreneurship, I'd just say get started. I know it took me a long time to start a company because I was trying to figure out what that perfect idea would be and the perfect timing and just waiting for the stars to align. There's no perfect idea. There's no star alignment. In fact, when I started LaunchX, you might think based on my passion now that like the day it was an idea was like, oh, this is my life's calling. No, it took me a while. So the first day it was a discussion. It was like, that has some potential. Like notes, what are the questions I want to have answered? And just, it was like a snowball that kept growing. Yeah. But I wasn't one of those people who was always in the education space or always social impact space or anything. No, I was an engineer. So I'd say the advice I'd have is, stop waiting, really. Stop waiting for whether it be the perfect timing or the perfect idea or anything else. Start with something. You don't have to have it be your passion. Get started, trial things, go out there, interview customers, and LaunchX can be a great way to do that. So encourage all of you to either join your school's LaunchX clubs or start one at your school.
Little plug, but you can definitely find the LaunchX link in the description, or it will be right here.
LaunchX.com.
Well, you heard it, guys. Figure out what you want to be awesome at and just go for it, right?
Yep.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
The CEO of LaunchX, Laurie Stach.
Thanks.
Whew, that was a fun one. It wasn't perfect, but I really hope you got a lot of value from it, learned something. Again, some notes are below. If you would like to find out more about LaunchX, the link is in the description as well. Thank you, Laurie, for taking your time to talk to me, to educate all the people that are watching or listening right now. Drop a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to see more, even hit the bell button if you would like to, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.